Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Jason, or as much of the internet knows me as Ezeekat. Honestly, you can call me anything. You can shout Jason, you can shout Ezeekat, you can shout most words, and I will at least look over because I respond to anger. Today I'm going to be showing you all of the books that I read in November. Now, last month, if you will recall, if you'll take a little flashback with me, I showed you all of the books and manga and graphic novels and everything that I read in October altogether. This year, I read quite a few, I read probably equal amounts of books and graphic novels, but if you put them all together, it's like a ton of books because I'm trying to meet my reading goal, so I've just been reading furiously. So that this is not an hour-long video, I'm going to do two separate videos. So you'll get the all the books I read first, and then you'll get in all the manga comics I read probably in about a week or maybe less than a week. And those will be two separate videos this time because it makes no sense to put them together. It's too much. It's too much too soon. We're gonna divvy it up a little bit. I had a very interesting month of reading in November. Like I said, I was reading a lot of comics, but also I was like traveling. I went to YALLFest in South Carolina. I meant to make a vlog, and I filmed approximately 1 minute of content in vlog style while I was there. So that didn't happen at all. Oops. But I'll just tell you, it was lovely. I got to meet a lot of great authors. I got to hang out with a lot of other bookish creators, like bookish internet creators. It's just a lovely time, and I got some books signed, and it was delightful. So it was a busy month, but I did get a lot of really good reading in, and I read a lot of books that I really liked and a couple that I didn't love. So we'll talk about that today. You know what? Enough with the preamble, enough with the introduction. Let's jump in. Okay, so first of all, I did read these two books kind of separately throughout the month. One I read at the very beginning and one I read towards the end. I'm just going to talk about them together. And that is the first two books in the Monk and Robot series by Becky Chamnbers. So first we have A Psalm for the Wild-Built, and then we have A Prayer for the Crown-Shy. I have to always look at these titles to make sure I'm saying them correctly. Obviously, these are very short little books. So these follow a teen monk, and they are trying to kind of figure out their life, figure out what they're doing with their everything. And so they kind of, in the first book, they go out into the woods where all of the robots and mechs live, because this is far in the future where machinery has basically like departed the world of man because it became sentient and lives on its own, and people and robots live separately. Well, they meet a robot, and the robot has been sent as like from its people, its robot people, to find out what humans need, which seems like a simple question, but it's not, right? Like, what do humans need? That's a very complex question. So the robot decides to follow the monk, and they kind of go on this journey together. These are quintessential cozy, I would say cozy sci-fi. I kind of read like cozy fantasy, but it's definitely more cozy like sci-fi. Very low stakes. It's really just a journey, like walking this journey with these two characters and sort of contemplating life and contemplating what it means to be alive and contemplating, the beauty of the world. And they're so lovely. They're so lovely. Easily two of my favorite books that I have read this year. I would recommend them to anyone. Just know that this is not an action adventure. This is not a high stakes story. This is not a plot centric. This is a journey with two characters and just reflecting on the world and life as we know it. And it is absolutely beautiful. There's two books so far. I'm sure there will be more, because the way that this ends, there has to be at least one more, if not more. I would love it to be continuous, but I feel like it might end up being a trilogy. It feels like the next logical step from this would be like a third act or an ending. Both of them made me cry because when you're contemplating life and what it means to be alive and purpose, and the first book especially talks a lot about, being driven to have a purpose and be someone and do something important, when really you could just exist, and that could be enough, right? Like that would be enough. And you would still be valid for just existing and enjoying your life. And that hit pretty hard as someone who is like always hustling to do the most. I kind of have a little breakdown over it, but a good breakdown, like a good cry. Same with the second. The second, really follows and kind of keeps talking about those things of like figuring out yourself, figuring out what is important to you. Is the work you do in your life important, or is just living life and appreciating life important? And can both be important, right? They're just lovely reads. And if you're looking for something cozy, if you're looking for something light, if you're looking for like a palate cleanser in between like bigger books, They're just wonderful, and I can't recommend them enough. So Becky Chambers, I am going to be reading a lot more Becky Chambers. These are the first Becky Chambers books I've ever read, and I've decided that I need to read all of them now. So you'll be seeing more Becky Chambers on my page very soon. All right, again, 2 books that I read at separate times during the month, one close to the beginning and one close to the ending, but I'm going to talk about them together, even though they are a little bit, those two kind of work really well together. These are going to be a little bit different, but we'll talk about them back to back. So we're going to talk about some Discworld books, and we're going to start with Eric, obviously by Terry Pratchett. This is a shorter book in the Discworld. This might be the shortest book in the Discworld series, I think. I don't know for sure. As many of you know, I'm trying to read every single Discworld book, so this was book number 9. This follows Rincewind the Wizard, and he meets Eric, who summons Rincewind through a portal and thinks that he's a demon, so he's asking Rincewind to do all these things which Rincewind can't do, but then suddenly is able to do. And so they kind of go on this like fun little adventure together. We get to see some of the politics of hell in the Discworld. We also go on like an alternate version history of like the Battle of Troy and the Odyssey, and it's really fun. A lot of people, when I said that this was the next one I was going to read, a lot of people were like, ooh, that's not a very good one. You're not going to like that one. But you know what? I ended up really enjoying it. I think of all the main characters in Discworld, Rincewind is probably my least favorite. I've made that pretty clear. I think that Rincewind, I'm kind of done with him. Like he's sort of the same shtick over and over again. Like, I don't want to go. He's very whiny, and I just don't love him as a character, and I liked him at first, but he's not really grown or developed in any way, so I've kind of gotten tired of him. But, all that being said, this is the perfect amount of time for me to deal with Rincewind. Like, it was just enough that I could enjoy it, and I found it funny, and he didn't overstay his welcome. Like, this is the perfect length Rincewind book, for sure. And I just thought it was fun. It was like a fun little side story, almost, a fun little gallivant through history. It was cute, it was quick, and it didn't overstay its welcome. So I actually ended up enjoying Eric more than I think a lot of people were expecting me to. Then later in the month, I read Moving Pictures, which is more of a full, like, Discworld story. This is one I notice when I talk about, I always pay attention to like what my comments say when I'm talking about these Discworld books on TikTok or Instagram. And a lot of people were like, this was very mixed. There were people like, I love Moving Pictures. And there were people like, that's my least favorite one in the series. So I had no idea what to expect. Essentially, this is a satirical look at the film industry and Hollywood and how capitalism affects entertainment and advertisements and just movies in general. I went to school I was a film major, and so this really resonated with me. I found it really lovely, really funny. The satire pieces of it I found just so good. They invent popcorn, but they call it banged grains, and I don't know why, but I found that just delightful. Every time they said it, I laughed. They also, one of the characters goes through an entire thing where he basically is coming up with the plot of the best movie ever, and he's basically coming up with Gone with the Wind, and at the very end he goes, and the title will be Blown Away, and that made me cackle. It just worked. There's a lot of film humor in this, so if you are a film buff or you enjoy talking about entertainment, especially if you enjoy you enjoy entertainment. I know I'm someone who loves movies and TV and media, but I love looking at it with a critical eye, right? Like, I love really analyzing the films I'm watching, really understanding like why choices were made, really understanding how films are marketed. Like, all of that is exciting to me, and this whole book talks about all of that, but in a very Discworld, funny, making fun of it kind of way, and the power of the Hollywood and the sort of magic that like draws people there to be in films, to do this with their life, to be actors or create films or create stories, or it's just fun. And if you like movies and entertainment, it's wonderful. And it's definitely one that you could easily read on its own. It really doesn't have anything to do with any of the other books, as most Discworld books do, but I think some are closer related than others. This is very standalone. You could easily read this and just check it out without having read any other Discworld. I liked it. Moving Pictures was one of my favorite reads I read this month, and I read a lot of good things this month, so yeah. All right, now we're going to get into the meat of the month. So I read, it's funny, when I do these wrap-ups, I don't think I quite understand. It really helps me see like the journey of reading that I went through for the month in a way that I don't really see unless I do a wrap-up like this, which is what makes wrap-ups fun. I say that with, never said the word fun with such an angry face. Okay, so the next one I read was The First to Die at the End by Adam Silvera. I've had this for a little while, and I've been meaning to read it, and I kept putting it off, and finally I made time for it. And I'm so glad I did, because honestly, I liked this a lot more than They Both Die at the End. Adam Silvera, I don't feel bad saying this because Adam Silvera will also be the first to say this. I've seen him say this in interviews and on panels. He's not a great world builder. He just isn't. And he, I don't feel bad saying that because he admits that himself. A lot of his world building is very like, make your own inferences, make your own, you decide what this looks like for you kind of, like he'll give you some information, but then you have to kind of piece it together in your head for yourself. And some people hate that. And I don't think I loved it. And They Both Die at the End. And Both Die at the End, I just had a lot of questions. I was like, I feel like it's not cohesive. Like I wanted more of that sci-fi element. I wanted to know more about the actual company, Deathcast, which is making these predictions about how, people are going to die. In this book, we do get more information, but we don't really get more information about the company itself. We see the night that the company opens, basically, and we see the first person who ever gets a call from Deathcast, and we follow his journey as well as another young man as they, meet and fall in love and, all of the things. And we also get a lot of insight into the owner of Deathcast and also just the people who work at the company, but not necessarily, we don't get any more information on like how the company functions at all. But I think just getting more insight into the people that are working in and creating that company does give us some more information, but in a very like obtuse way. So outside of that, the romantic story in this, I will say at the end of They Both Die at the End, I felt that book ends in a very hopeless way. I mean, it's called They Both Die at the End. You know what happens, right? When that book ended, it's just a sad book. Like when it ends, you're just sad. Like you're just depressed. It feels very hopeless to me. Whereas The First to Die at the End is still a sad book. It still has a sad ending, but I left the book with a lot of hope, and a lot of belief that there is good in the world and that, I think the whole point of this series is to make every moment count in your life, right? That's kind of the piece that this whole series works around, is like make every moment of your life count because you never know when it could be your last day or your last minute. So make the most of every second. And I think They Both Die at the End gets that point across, but this book nails that point. Like it really gets it across in a really, really powerful way. Yeah, I was quite surprised. I liked this significantly more than They Both Die at the End. And what's great about it is it is a prequel, so you could easily just read this by itself, or you could read it first and then read They Both Die at the End, or you can really read them in any order you want. And there are some really fun homages to the first book, to They Both Die at the End in this book, so might be worth reading. Or you could also read this book first, and then you'll have that information going into They Both Die at the End. There's all kinds of fun ways to read it, but I really liked it. It was a big surprise. I thought I was going to like it, but I didn't know I was going to love it. And I did end up loving it. So The First to Die at the End. This next one will be pretty quick. So this is 12 Angels Weeping by Dave Rudden. This is 12 stories of the villains from Doctor Who. As you can imagine, this is an anthology, but all written by one person. It's a bunch of stories kind of centered around a very loose holiday Christmas theme about villains in the Doctor Who universe. The thing with anthologies, and even in this case, is some of the stories are bangers and some of the stories are just boring. So it was very hit or miss for me. I would say about half of the stories I thought were really well done, and half the stories I was like, I could have done without this, right? I think if you're a Doctor Who fan, it's worth reading. It's worth checking out. The Doctor is in the book in various different forms, but not in every single story, I don't think. And like I said, some of them are great, some of them aren't so great. If you're a Doctor Who family, this might be fun to read throughout December and just like read a story a night, or, just something fun like that. Fun read, but not in any way essential. You know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't ever tell someone like, oh, you're a Doctor Who fan? This is the one you have to read. Yeah, you don't have to read it, but it was all right. Okay, next up is this book. Blew me away. So this is The Winners by Fredrik Backman. This is the third book in the Beartown trilogy. So if you haven't read them already, this is, Beartown and then Us Against You. So those are the first two books. This is the third book. This book is a chunky monster, so it took some time to get through. It took a little bit more time than usually my reading takes for a book. Fredrik Backman is absolutely one of my favorite authors by far, and Beartown is one of my favorite books, even though it does... It's a hard book for me to recommend. So I would say Beartown is actually in my top 5 books of all time. I adore Beartown, but it is a hard book to recommend because it does deal with, I don't know exactly what I'm allowed to say on YouTube, so I'm gonna be a little coded here, but it deals with assault on a young woman by a young man. And that is sort of the thing that is the kind of the main center point of Beartown that kind of follows through these books. So The young man is the star of the hockey team, and the young girl's dad is the coach of the hockey team. And this is a small town that could be anywhere in the middle of this really cold forest. And the whole town really centers on hockey. Like, that's their thing. So when this assault happens and it is revealed to the town, it really splits the town. And we see how people react to things like this, and, you know, young women coming forward and sharing their story. And, it's a hard read. Like, it's very much mirrors things that we've seen in the real world. But it is also a beautiful read. Like, the story is absolutely stunning and gorgeous. And I'm talking about Beartown right now. So I really love these 3 books, but they are, I tell you, if you're going to go into them, know that is going to be like a big trigger warning, because the books do deal heavily with that specific thing that happens in the first book. So that being said, the winners, the characters from the first book, like the young characters, have gotten older. We are seeing kind of how the town has developed over time, and basically the death of one of the town's like matriarchs causes a lot of things to all happen at once. And there's also a big storm. So there's a death of one of the town's really important people, and then there is a big storm that causes a lot of issues that then, you know, we see the politics of the different people in the town trying to work out and, you know, kind of fighting against each other. And there's also another town that is also a hockey town that Beartown has a huge rivalry with, and we're seeing that rivalry kind of like get bigger and bigger to the point where it like spreads out in violence. It's too much to explain in a video. There's just a lot that's going on in this book, but it is stunningly beautiful. It will break your heart in 1,000 different ways. It is an excellent end to this trilogy. It's stunning. I would not read it without reading Beartown or Us Against You. I would read them in order because it is much more impactful, I think, if you do. This book does do a great job of recapping what happened in the previous 2 books, but still, if you're going to read these, do yourself a favor, just read them in order. They are stunning, but they are very challenging, hard reads that will break your heart in 1,000 pieces. All 3 of them will, and will really make you think about how you interact with situations like this as a person. Beautiful, beautiful books, but just know that going in. This next one is another book that just absolutely blew me out of the water this month. So this is The Spear Cuts Through Water by Simon Jimenez. This is a story. I'm going to explain it to you the way I explain it on TikTok, because it's the only way I can explain it. So the story is about these 2 young men that are going on this journey to return a spear to its rightful owner. That story is told to you as like in second person, as someone who is hearing it from their grandmother, and also watching it play out on a stage. And throughout all of this, you're also getting some quick little first person, like almost in the mind of different characters throughout the world to understand like little other elements. It's a hard book to explain. So basically it's told in first, second, and third person. It's wild. It is a wild reading experience. But it is so good. And I will say the first half of the book, I was not sure. Like, a few people had told me I would really like this one. First half of the book, I was like having a really hard time getting into it because it's such a bizarre read, and the way it's structured is very not what we're used to, or not what I'm used to. But the second half of the book, when it all comes together, when you understand why all of these structural choices and POV choices were made, it's so good. I mean, I was that emoji where like the explosion comes out of your head. That's how I felt at the end of this book. It's really, really incredible. It is an incredible work of adult fantasy, and it is an adult fantasy. It has a lot of violence in many different forms. Like, if you've ever read The Poppy War, I would give some very similar content warnings as The Poppy War. Like, this is a dark fantasy adult story, deals with a lot of really adult concepts, and also just like the structure and the actual nuance of the characters in the story, I think is going to be more enjoyed by an adult fantasy reader. It's a book, it is not a casual read. It's not something you just read for fun on the weekend. It is you're going to have to wrap your mind around it. You're going to have to really like dig your feet in to understand the structure and how the story is being told, because it is unlike most things that I've read, but it's so worth it. It's so worth that commitment to like taking some time and really like digging your feet in, because it's really good. One of the best books this year, honestly. It doesn't go above. Some people thought that I would like this more than Babel. It hasn't beat Babel for me yet. It didn't beat Babel for me, but it was really good. If you're looking for something in the adult fantasy space that's different than other things that you've read, this is fantastic. Highly recommend. All right, this next one, I actually read an arc. This came out earlier this year, but I was sent an arc before it came out. This is Message Not Found by Dante. by Dante Medema. This is a young adult story. It is about a young woman whose friend, her like best friend, dies in a car accident, and she uses an app that her mom had created, and she kind of engineers the app and puts a bunch of information, like her previous texts and other people's previous texts and information, into the app to create a bot that like replicates her best friend, so she can still keep communicating with her best friend. And as time goes on, she starts to find out that there were things her best friend was not telling her. So not only is she dealing with the grief of losing her friend, but she's also dealing with like kind of coming to terms with like, wow, my friend was keeping a lot from me and some pretty bad things. This was really good. Like as far as young adult drama, like contemporary goes, really excellent. And I liked it a lot more than I thought I was going to. I don't know, going in when I read the concept, I was like, I don't know, maybe. A lot of the story, as you can imagine, because we're talking about like texting a bot, is told through text message. And sometimes, I feel like sometimes when books do this, where like they'll have a chapter and then like a text message chain, the text message chain can feel very throwaway, like and kind of just feel like a space filler to like buffer out the pages. That is not how this feels. The text messages in this book are very effective in conveying more of the story. There are emotional beats in the text messages that are so good. Like this is a little bit of a spoiler. I'm so sorry, but you need to understand like how this works. So she's texting this bot, which is her friend who passed away, and they will get into a fight at one point, and the bot will say like, I don't want to talk about this over text. Can't you just come over? And that lands really well because you know, and she knows, that her friend is not alive anymore, and that this bot is essentially an imaginary version of her friend. So the text messaging piece is used really effectively. I feel like it's not often used this effectively, and it was a breath of fresh air to see it used in such a compelling, interesting way to tell this story. I really liked it. I thought this was another big surprise for me of the month. Message Not Found. It was quite good. Very sad. Very sad. A little bit heartbreaking, especially if you've ever lost somebody, or if you've ever, lost somebody suddenly. You're going to see a lot of those emotions put onto the page, but really, really excellent. I liked it a lot. Recommend. Next up, I read The Marvelous Land of Snergs. Look at that cover. So beautiful. So this is supposedly the story. This story came out many years ago, and this is kind of like a retelling or a rewriting of it. I forget the original year that it came out, but I think it was like 1920s or something. I don't know. I can't find it. It came out a while back, and it's supposedly the story that inspired J.R.R. Tolkien to write The Hobbit. So I wanted to read it. I was like, that sounds fun. It was okay. So here's the thing I'll say. I think if you have younger kids and you're looking for a book that is a little bit more advanced, not just a picture book that you want to maybe like read a chapter a night, something light, something fantasy, think like, I don't know, like Fraggle Rock is the word, but like Willow or, things like that, like kind of like very chill, like family-friendly fantasy. I think this would be great for that. Like this is a good, like, we'll read a chapter every night before bed kind of book. But I don't think adults are going to get a whole lot out of it. You can definitely see where some of the inspiration for The Hobbit comes from, especially in like one of the characters is very similar to a Hobbit, but also just like the general vibes. Like the vibes of this book really reminded me of just like Hobbits in general. But as a Lord of the Rings fan, it was not an essential read. I almost wish, I know that the whole, like I'll say it worked. The reason I picked this up is because it was marketed as the story that inspired The Hobbit. But unfortunately, that made me go into the book with how I feel about The Hobbit, and this came nowhere close to that. So it actually, I feel like, hurt the book a little bit. I don't think it's a bad book. I just don't think that adults are going to get a lot out of it. I think this is one that's best read to or with, or even if you're looking for like something for young kids to read, like this is a good like younger middle grade. I mean, it's got like big words and like some illustrations. Like this didn't feel very adult friendly, and that's okay, right? Like middle grade, younger. I love when middle grade or like younger middle grade does feel adult friendly, but it doesn't have to because that's not who it's written for. So it's okay. So I think if the right person, the right kid or the right family is reading this, they're going to really love it. But for me, it was just okay. All right, so next up, I read When the Tiger Comes Down the Mountain by Nghi. This is the second book in this series. Again, very, very short little baby books. I read the first one last month. I forgot to talk about it in my video. So essentially, these books follow I think they're a monk that is journeying and collecting stories that they basically like catalog stories from important people or from all over that they can then report back. And the first book, they're collecting a story. This book, they meet these 3 tigers that are threatening to eat them, and the tigers can turn into people, and they sit down and they're like, well, tell us a story and we won't eat you till the story is finished. And they tell them a story about that has a tiger, and it's a story that the tigers also know. And so the tigers are constantly correcting them like, no, that's not what actually happened. I think what's interesting about it is it kind of approaches that idea that like stories are different depending on the perspective that they are told from. And that's kind of the main theme of this book is like, depending on who you hear the story from, it's going to be different, right? The hero is going to be different. The outcome is going to be different. The way that even the moral might be different, right? So how does a story from the perspective of a young human woman sound different than the story you might get from the tiger that's involved in this story? These are really beautiful, really excellent. I do recommend. They're very low stakes. It's sort of like you're sitting down to hear someone tell a story. They're very short. You can read them in an afternoon, but they're very beautiful. They're just very beautiful, lovely reads. Not as wholesome as Monk and Robot. Like these are a little bit darker for sure. But I really like them, and I just ordered the 3rd one, so I will definitely be reading that this month. But they're really beautiful, and they're, again, a really great palate cleanser in between bigger books, so recommend. And last, but certainly not least, the Ezeekat's Book Club book for November, what month are we even in, was Other Birds by Sarah Addison Allen. So you guys are going to be the first to hear my official review of this because I haven't posted the review on TikTok or Instagram or anything yet. I gave this 4 out of 5. I thought this was excellent. It is a very cozy read. It deals with a young woman who moves into like an apartment complex where her deceased mother used to live, and she moves there to try and kind of learn about her mom. And when she gets there, she finds out that her mom didn't leave anything behind. So she starts to get to know the neighbors, and it also has this like speculative fiction kind of world to it. Like she owns an invisible bird, and there's some magic, and there's some ghosts, and we get to hear some of the storytelling told from the ghosts. And all of the characters have these really rich backstories. And it's very cozy. It's very light but beautiful. There's some really stunning writing in this book. Oh my God. There are some lines that you'll just be like, like beautiful storytelling, beautiful. The only reason that it didn't get a 5 is that to me it just wasn't long enough. Which is a weird thing. Which I feel like sometimes you get to an end of a 1,000-page book, you're like, I want more. But what I mean by that is I feel like I was just settling down with these characters. I was just getting to know them, and then the book ended. And I feel like there was a lot of loose ends. There was a lot more I wanted to know, to the point where like it felt like the story was incomplete, right? Like I love an ambiguous ending. I think kind of maybe the point is that we just get to know everybody and then we leave them where they are in a better place than we met them. I think that's probably the point of the book. But even so, I felt like I didn't get enough to have a full book. You know what I mean? It's almost like I got the first 2 acts and then I didn't get a 3rd act. And I kind of wanted I wanted maybe a little more closure or a little bit more information, or I just feel like we could have had a little bit more. And because of that, the book felt like it was missing a little something. But like I said, stunning writing, fantastic character work, a really lovely book. And I wouldn't tell you not to read it because I felt like it needed more, because there was still a lot here that was just absolutely fantastic. Just a really gorgeous read. So really loved this one. I just wanted more of it. Can I just give me a sequel? I would read a sequel. That would fix all of my concerns, probably. But this was lovely. Other Birds by Sarah Addison Allen. And that's everything I read in November, book-wise. Like I said, I'll have another video out at some point with all the manga that I read in November. But that's all the books I read. Let me know if you read any of these. Let me know if you enjoyed any of these. Let me know if you saw something here that you're like, wow, I really need to pick that up now, and I want to read it. As always, I always forget to tell you this at the beginning of the video, but hopefully you're still here. Are you still here? If you're here, please make sure to subscribe and like and hit that notification bell, especially if you want to see that next manga video. That way you'll know when I post it. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, happy reading.